Picture a boardroom, not a restaurant. A father at the head of a long table, his 4 grown children down the sides, and a stack of share certificates that one man's hand will not let go of. That room, not a rival, not a recession, is the thing that almost killed Swiss Chalet. Most companies die from the outside. A bigger competitor undercuts them. The economy turns. The internet makes them pointless. Swiss Chalet nearly died the opposite way. From the inside, from the family that owned it. Here are the numbers that frame the whole story. In 1977, the founder walked away from the business he built and pocketed a reported $15 million. The corporate dynasty that bought it then spent the better part of 2 decades at war with itself over who controlled the company, a feud so bitter it earned the nickname "Death by 1,000 Preferred Shares." Fast forward, in 2018, the parent rebranded to bury the family's name, and in 2022, the investment giant Fairfax Financial, the firm people call Canada's Berkshire Hathaway, took the whole thing private in a deal worth about $1.2 billion. Since then, the financials have gone dark. So sophisticated money paid over $1 billion for a 70-year-old rotisserie chicken chain, one that food critics mock, that activists picket, that got run out of half the country and then pulled it off the public market where nobody can watch the books. Why? Because if you think Swiss Chalet is a restaurant, you're missing the point. It's a logistics and real estate machine disguised as a Sunday dinner. And it survived 3 things that should have each killed it on their own: its owners, its critics, and its entire dying industry. We'll take them one at a time. Start with the owners, because that's the part nobody prints on the menu. To understand the war at the top, you have to know what was worth fighting over, and that goes back to 1954. A young man named Maurice Morin, everyone called him Rick, opened a rotisserie restaurant on Bloor Street West in Toronto, right by Varsity Stadium. He hadn't stumbled into the business, he'd grown up in it. His father ran a charcoal chicken spot in Montreal called Chalet Barbecue. Rick carried the idea to Ontario and gave it a strange name. Here's the first odd thing. There is nothing Swiss about Swiss Chalet, and there never was. The Swiss was a nod to a style of slowly turning chicken on the spit, not the country. There are no Swiss dishes on the menu. Rick even dressed the dining rooms up like a fake alpine lodge, dark carved wood, little shuttered windows, to sell a fantasy that had nothing to do with the food. Decades later, the company would lean so far into the joke that it ran an ad campaign built on the line, "Nothing else is Swiss." It turned its own absurdity into a brand. But the theme is not what made it print money. The discipline did. The menu was almost stubbornly small. A quarter chicken, a roll, fries, and a warm little bowl of dipping sauce in the middle of the table. That was basically it. Keep that bowl in mind. It comes back, and it matters more than anything else on the table. To a customer, that simplicity felt humble. On a balance sheet, it was close to genius. A whole rotisserie bird needs no specialist chef. A short menu means fewer ingredients, less waste, lower overhead, and a price an ordinary family could say yes to every single week. What Rick was really selling wasn't chicken, it was certainty. The bird tasted the same every time. The sauce came warm every time. The bill never surprised you. For a generation of Ontario families, Swiss Chalet quietly became the answer to "Where are we eating Sunday?" Through the 1960s, that consistency hardened into ritual. You knew the chicken before you ordered it. You knew the sauce would arrive warm in that little glass bowl. In a world that kept changing, it was the restaurant that promised not to. And Rick pulled the same trick twice. In 1959, he co-founded a burger chain with a partner named George Sukornik. They meant to call it Humphreys, but there was an old sign sitting around from a defunct Toronto car dealership, John Harvey Motors, and reusing it was cheaper than printing a new one. So the burger place became Harvey's. We've told its full story on this channel. It's on the card. The point here is that one man built 2 of the most familiar names in the country and then started parking them under a single roof. One building, one parking lot, one set of overhead split between a sit-down chicken dinner and a grab-and-go burger. He was optimizing real estate before that was a phrase. The first Harvey's opened in Richmond Hill, on a 10-acre lot he bought off a bankrupt Dairy Queen operator, and before long, there was one sitting just a few doors from his own Swiss Chalet on Bloor Street. That little accident of geography became a national playbook. Stack the dinner crowd and the takeout crowd on one expensive corner and split the bill between them. Then, in 1977, Rick cashed out for that reported $15 million and sailed off to live as a private investor. The buyer was a company called Cara, and Cara has one of the strangest backstories in Canadian business. It started in 1883 selling newspapers and snacks on passenger trains, then graduated to feeding people on airplanes. By the early 2000s, its flight kitchens reportedly turned out more than 12,000 airline meals a day from Vancouver alone, and it controlled a majority of the country's airline catering. So the outfit that scaled Swiss Chalet nationwide began by handing sandwiches through train windows, and it brought industrial-grade logistics to what still looked like a neighborhood chicken joint. Cara had the muscle. What it didn't have was peace at the top. Cara was controlled by one family, the Phelans, and the fortunes Swiss Chalet helped build very nearly tore them apart. At the center was the patriarch, Paul James Phelan, a man who would not let go of control. The whole conflict came down to a special class of shares that carried the voting power over the company, and he refused to divide them fairly among his 4 children. The board brought in consultants to broker peace. They were politely ignored. The dynasty spent years fighting itself, while downstairs, the restaurants were left to fend for themselves. The board didn't just watch. It brought in a seasoned family business consultant who laid out the obvious fix: share and share alike. Split the votes evenly, divide the assets among the 4 branches, and let the most capable of the next generation rise on merit. On paper, it was sensible. In practice, it was dead on arrival. The patriarch wouldn't surrender control. The children were tired of waiting, and the years simply burned. Now here's the reframe the usual telling misses, and it's the strangest gift in the whole story. While the owners were at war upstairs, nobody had the attention span to modernize what was working downstairs. Nobody ripped out the quarter chicken to chase a trend. Nobody cheapened the sauce to juice a quarter. The dysfunction at the top accidentally protected the product at the bottom. The very thing that should have killed Swiss Chalet may be the thing that preserved it. But neglect always sends a bill, and it came due at the edges of the map. With nobody really steering, the brand got slow and clumsy everywhere it wasn't already loved. In Quebec, it ran headfirst into St-Hubert, the homegrown rotisserie chain that families there already treated as their own. And Swiss Chalet retreated out of the province entirely. The American experiment never caught on. The last locations in suburban Buffalo, New York closed by 2010, and a lone outpost in Puerto Rico, a genuine curiosity that dated back to the late 60s, shut a year later. Out west, in British Columbia, the brand had hung on for decades, but never won the devotion it had in Ontario. As Vancouver and Victoria grew into world-class food cities, a plain quarter chicken started to feel like a relic, while the rent ate the margins alive. It was the very same chicken that ruled Ontario. Out there, it just read as dated instead of beloved, and that gap turned out to be fatal. Look at the footprint today, and the story tells itself. Swiss Chalet has gone from around 212 locations in 2020 to roughly 175 now. About 80% of them in Ontario, with none left in Quebec and none in British Columbia. The national chain quietly shrank into a regional one wearing a national logo. The owners survived their own war. The map did not. And that should have been the end of it, except the brand had 2 more death sentences waiting. Which brings us to the critics. Here's that warm little bowl again. Because the second thing that should have sunk Swiss Chalet is the very thing its fans love most: the sauce. It might be the single most divisive condiment in the country. To believers, it is the entire point. They order extra cups and pour it over everything on the plate, treating a dipping sauce like a main ingredient. They smuggle tubs of it across the border. People who move away beg friends to ship the powdered packets. There are whole forums devoted to reverse engineering it at home, and none of them quite nail it. To critics, it's indefensible. A food writer named Renee Swan, writing in The Takeout, called it watery, viscous, and oddly sour, and compared it to a flat Bloody Mary that had lost whatever kick it once had. There's even a running fan joke that the chicken's kept just dry enough that you need the sauce, so you keep buying it. And none of that hurts the brand. It helps. Because here's the business truth underneath the bickering. Anyone can roast a chicken, but nobody can legally make that exact sauce. The recipe has been a guarded company secret since the first Bloor Street location. The grocery packet hints at it. Tomato powder, a little chicken fat, a whisper of sage, but never the formula. So the sauce people argue about is actually a moat. The hatred is not a bug, it's the wall around the castle. You don't earn that kind of loyalty by being agreeable. You earn it by being unmistakable. The critics weren't only food writers, though. Some were the families who actually run the restaurants. In Napanee, Ontario, the operators of a combined Harvey's and Swiss Chalet location ended up at legal war with head office over something almost absurdly ordinary. They withheld rent after getting stuck paying for repairs, including an HVAC unit they said was older than they'd been told when they signed the lease. The company's response was not ordinary. It changed the locks and hauled the food stock off to another store. The franchisee, Morgan Rayer, described it plainly. They changed the locks and put them out on the street. Picture being the family that ran your town's restaurant, arriving to find you no longer have a key. They fought it and won the right to reopen. And there's a quietly Canadian reason they could. Unlike the United States, Canada has no single national franchise rulebook. The protections live province by province, and Ontario's Arthur Wishart Act gave the franchisees real standing against a head office. That lawsuit was an Ontario case for a reason. Fight that same fight in another province, and it might have ended differently. And at the same time, the activist group Mercy for Animals was running hard campaigns, petitions, protests outside restaurants, even demonstrations at the Toronto Stock Exchange where the parent company traded, pushing Swiss Chalet to adopt tougher animal welfare standards for the birds in its supply chain. It put the wholesome, family-friendly image under a very different kind of fire, and it trapped the executives. Clean up the sourcing without raising prices enough to scare off the working-class families who came for a cheap quarter chicken in the first place. Food critics, franchisees, activists, everyone took a shot. None of them landed the knockout. Which leaves the thing that was supposed to finish the job, the industry itself. For more than a decade, the middle of the restaurant world has been bleeding out. Third-party delivery apps rewired how families eat and cannibalized margins. Commercial rents in the big cities turned dining rooms into liabilities. Famous chains went dark. Younger diners drifted to quick counters and trendy independents. By every rule of modern dining, a dated rotisserie joint with a fake Swiss name should have been first against the wall. And the data shows how brutal it got. Statistics Canada's figures point to real strain across food service. Spending shifting, costs climbing, the price of eating out running ahead of what most paychecks gained. The American giants people line us up against, like Darden, lean on dense, packed corridors, where a sprawling menu and constant test kitchen experiments actually pay off. Canada doesn't have that geography. Up here, the distances are punishing, and the math is meaner. Instead, it turned out to be built for exactly this weather. And here's the part the business press keeps relearning. In a country the size of Canada, a complicated menu is a liability. Every extra item is one more supplier, one more thing to truck across thousands of kilometers and several climate zones before it spoils. A restaurant built on a handful of things barely has anything that can break. What looked like boring was actually armor. The consultants who say a sprawling menu is how you win the modern diner have it backwards. In an inflationary squeeze, complexity is the death sentence, and simplicity is the defensive play. Swiss Chalet's refusal to reinvent itself is the whole reason it's still standing. And the modern owners finally leaned into that strength instead of fighting it. In 2018, weighed down by decades of family drama, Cara renamed itself Recipe Unlimited. By then, Swiss Chalet wasn't a standalone chain at all. It was one piece of the biggest full-service restaurant company in the country, sitting beside Harvey's, Montana's, Kelsey's, The Keg, and, in the move you have to admire for its nerve, St-Hubert, the very Quebec rival that had run it out of the province, which the company simply bought in 2016 for over $500 million. It couldn't beat the brand that owned Quebec, so it bought it. Under the new name, the company kept acquiring. It even secured the rights to bring Olive Garden to Canada, and Swiss Chalet now sat inside a roster employing tens of thousands across the country. It had quietly become a load-bearing piece of Canadian economic furniture, which is a big part of why simply letting it die was never really on the table. Then, in 2022, Fairfax took the whole portfolio private for around $1.2 billion, consolidating Swiss Chalet and its siblings into a quiet, patient pool of Canadian capital off the public market. Step back, and the billion-dollar bet stops looking strange. Fairfax wasn't buying a tired chicken chain. It was buying a low-maintenance cash machine with a secret recipe moat, a national supply chain, a growing grocery business, and a brand Canadians actually trust. Exactly the kind of boring, durable asset patient money loves, precisely because nobody else is excited about it. And then they did the smart, slightly cynical thing. They sold you the memory. Curbside pickup, they cheekily branded Chalet Valet. Pull up, they bring it to your window. A spot in the Scene Plus rewards program millions of Canadians already use. Inside the restaurants, they added self-serve kiosks and rebuilt the clunky delivery app. None of it touched the food. All of it lowered the friction between you and the quarter chicken. And a full march into the grocery aisle, frozen chicken strips, pot pies, bottled sauce and marinades, the brand sitting in your freezer between visits, even in the provinces where the restaurants had closed. Nowhere is that clearer than the festive special. Every holiday season, the same box: quarter chicken, stuffing, cranberry, a couple of Lindor chocolates, and a scratch-and-win card with, in one recent year, well over 700,000 prizes. For a huge number of Canadians, that box isn't a menu item, it's a tradition as fixed as putting up the tree. That is not nostalgia happening to a brand. That is a brand farming the nostalgia on purpose every December. Your memory is their business plan. And it worked. As everything else in food got pricier and more complicated and somehow gave you less, a plain, hot rotisserie chicken started to feel like a relief again. Part of it was the price. A whole family fed for what 2 fast casual bowls now cost. Part of it was fatigue with apps and upsells and shrinking portions. And part of it was simpler than that. People missed sitting down somewhere that felt like it remembered them. In 2026, Canadian shoppers voted it the country's most trusted brand for family dining out, strongest in Ontario and Atlantic Canada. A Business Insider reviewer went further, telling an American audience that Swiss Chalet's crispy chicken sandwich held its own against the best of the U.S. fast food market. It didn't earn any of that by reinventing itself. It earned it by refusing to. Here's the detail that says it all. The very first Swiss Chalet on Bloor Street is gone. They tore down the whole block and put up a 32-story condo tower. The building that started everything is now a luxury high-rise. And the brand it launched is still out there, still turning chickens, still warming that little bowl of sauce. The bricks didn't survive. The idea did. Because in the end, the owners, the critics, and the dying industry all failed for the same reason. Swiss Chalet was built so simply, so cheaply, so hard to break that none of them could get a grip on it. A legacy brand can't live on memories alone, but it dies the moment it forgets what the memory was for. This one never forgot. So tell me which side you're on. Is Swiss Chalet a real Canadian survivor? Proof that doing one simple thing well beats chasing every trend? Or a relic running on nostalgia until the next generation stops showing up? And settle the only debate that actually matters. The Chalet sauce. National treasure you'd put on everything? Or does it belong in the trash exactly like that critic said? Don't sit on the fence, and drop the memory while you're at it. The Sunday booth, the festive special, the extra sauce you ordered every single time. I read the comments. Because Swiss Chalet survived by protecting the one thing that made it itself. Soon on this channel, we're walking into another Canadian institution that did the opposite. A place so woven into this country that we treat it like the flag. The morning ritual millions of us still line up for out of pure habit. Except somewhere along the way, the thing we fell in love with, quietly, stopped being made the way it used to be. Same name on the cup. A different country pulling the strings. Until then, stay sharp.